Hello everybody, welcome to live stream number 2 of this series on how to help people move their content from a more face-to-face delivery or blended approach to purely digital in the age of the coronavirus outbreak. Couple of things. First of all, I might sound a little bit bunged up. That's because I have hay fever, nothing else more sinister. But if you see me scratching my nose, wiggling, anything like that, it's because it's very itchy today and I've been struggling with it. So I've taken my pills, my medication. Let's see, hopefully it will kick in and I won't be too bad. But if I sneeze or anything like that, I apologise if it blows your headphones out. Other than that, you might notice that we were supposed to be joined by a colleague of mine, Yuhu, and unfortunately he can't join the call today, or the stream today, because he has to go to the doctors. He has an issue with his ear and can't hear very well, which kind of makes doing this kind of thing very difficult because he needs to obviously hear me, and we to have a good dialogue. So for today's stream, like some of the ones that we'll do in the future, it's just me. No problem there. I had a series of questions I was going to ask Yuhu about his experience with regards to pushing out content on digital platforms, being a digital instructional designer. But no issue. I have my own experience, and I would love it if in the chat we could get people contributing there, either it's questions that they have, challenges that they might have, or even some experiences they want to share themselves of things that they're doing really well. Or things that they're trying to implement now and maybe not doing so well, or they're in a stage of they're in development. But even so, it'd be good to share thoughts with everybody, with the people in chat, so that we can all learn from each other and see what we're going to do, see how we can help each other moving forwards. So without much further ado then, I'm going to touch on a couple of points. As I said, please post into the chat. This only works really if we're all contributing and engaging with each other. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things that I've been thinking about in the last week, based again on the questions I was going to pose to Yuhu. So first and foremost is, I was going to ask, what are the biggest challenges that we see trying to take something purely digital? So I asked that to you. What are the biggest challenges do you think there are? For me, in the last few weeks, we've seen this need to suddenly shift to digital, and it's not a case of, well, we'd like to, or we think our audience want it. It's become a necessity. What that means is that, rapidly we're scrambling as people who deliver training into organisations, or in organisations ourselves, to meet the needs of our community, our learners community, and that is a real challenge. So one of the things that I've seen is, how do you shift the mindset of the individual from a position where they were used to going on face-to-face training, where they were used to maybe turning up to a webinar, where there's that group interaction, particularly that group interaction, and how do you keep maintaining that as you go forward? I mean, Yenny, sorry, you've pasted into the comments there, no direct contact, completely agree. The biggest challenge we have is that we now don't have that direct contact. But I think what's interesting is that we are finding ways to make contact with our peers, our friends, and our families. So, and we may have mentioned this in the last stream in terms of webcam usage, but when I'm on a call now, invariably people will turn on their webcam, whether that's business related or otherwise. Invariably before, that was not the case. So people are keen to reach out. They do want to feel that sense of connection and community. So how can we take advantage of that? And maybe some of the points following on now will cover that. So point number 2, I kind of touched on this already, more forms of digital communication. But what do I mean by that? Well, people are branching out in different directions. So let's just think about the ways that we can connect digitally. So we can use video. We can use video, whether it's recorded, and it can be recorded on an iPhone or a mobile device. It can be recorded on a webcam, like this could be, for example, or even more high-end, such an actual proper camera. But the reality is that we can pull that content in and publish it via platforms like YouTube, Vimeo. You can put content up to Twitter, for example, as long as it's around about 1:20 long. So really, there are loads of options for us to create and publish video content. But that's not the only medium by which we connect. Podcasts in recent years have gone through the roof in terms of their usage, particularly for people on the commute. But now we might have people going around their daily chores in their home, doing some gardening, building some flat pack furniture they've ordered because they needed it. But the point is that you have people as a captive audience. Reach out to them on things like podcasts, where the medium can be quite nice when it's a discussion topic, a little bit like what we do here, but where you've got the option to go maybe a bit deeper on certain subjects. Podcasts work really, really well. We then got things such as creating more traditional e-learning content, and that's great, and that 100% works in this instance. But what I'd counsel people on doing is just producing e-learning content, particularly if it's rehashing decks that we had prior to the COVID outbreak that we use for face-to-face or webinar purposes, and trying to reskin them for the new world in which we now find ourselves. What we must do is consider, as I said on the last stream, consider the end goal. So what is it that this training was trying to deliver? And I think back to when I used to deliver training or coaching from that perspective, and a lot of the time that was about shifting a person's behaviour, about having that one-to-one connection, or about having that connection with a small cohort of people and instilling in them a behavioural change. That is a challenge from a distance perspective, but it is not impossible. So the question is, how would a piece of e-learning deliver that? It might be that it doesn't. It might be that it needs to be a webinar where two people get on a webcam like this and have an open and frank conversation and treat it like they're face-to-face. So what I counsel you on doing is not necessarily jumping down the route of saying, let's create a piece of e-learning using a standard authoring tool, or let's suddenly create a video. Think about what you need that training to deliver in terms of impact. Sure, it's going to be supplemented by other things, but you need to think about, this is the main core, the backbone of what, my training program or my training course. How is that aligning to the experience that I would normally want someone to have going through this, or at least align to the behaviours I want someone to have thereafter? Okay. In terms of other technologies as well, we're seeing a huge flux of people onto things like Slack and Teams in recent years. So use those forums, use those platforms. And on the topic of forums, maybe set up some more formal forums where people can go and find content in a different way. For example, the difference between a forum and something like a Teams or a Slack is that Teams and Slack work in the moment based upon conversations between people, often in user groups. But what might be useful is sometimes having more of a record and a library of that information, which is where a forum or a wiki or a blog comes in. Very, very useful. Easy to set up, and it really helps to drive learner engagement, which we'll touch on later on this stream. I've just seen a question from Yenny here. What kind of learning videos topics should I record, and what kind of topics are better stream live? It's a great question. And I think it depends upon the way that you want to present that content, largely. So if I'm able to utilize a dynamic of an individual, like I did on last stream with Laura, where we can have a back and forth, a conversation, I think it's more engaging for people. It feels more natural. So I would advise that if you can do that, like you have a subject matter expert or a group of them that you can pull in to your training content, then I think that's great, particularly if you can have them all on screen and have that kind of round table experience. If that's not possible or not appropriate for the training, then by all means, maybe go down the more typical route of a piece of more standardized video. That said as well, and I probably will touch on this a bit later, but video does not have to be hard. I've mentioned there's multiple devices for doing it, and there's multiple ways to edit it, but what I would say is that, have a practice, have a play. I think the reality is there's no right answer to that question. What there is potentially something that may be more appropriate, but that also might shift given your audience. You might know them and think, they want to access this when they've got time. Then maybe going down the video library route is much better than trying to get people in one location at a specific time to stream to them. So play around and let's have a look. But do track the engagement with that stream or with that content as well. Don't stop doing the things that we were doing great before, like capturing great data. Thank you, Yeti, for that question. So what was I talking about before? Oh yeah, I was talking about forums and wikis and blogs. So there are lots of options to essentially capitalize upon that social bandwagon, if you want to call it that we have right now, where people are just keen to reach out. These things exist and people are wanting to contribute. So I touched on video a moment ago with Yenny's question, so this is kind of a perfect segue into that point, which is how can you create video, and how can you do it rapidly and at low cost? Because let's be honest, that's the challenge, right? We don't have huge amounts of money to invest into software. We might not even have the skills internally within our business or in our organization to actually create that learning content. So how can I do this simply, on budget and on time? And never has the word on time been more relevant than it is now, where we need to push content out almost, arguably on a daily basis, or at least at pace where we can maximize the time that people currently have. And let's be honest, we don't know how long we'll have a captive audience like this for. So there are a number of options when it comes to that. So I've already mentioned the ways that you can film: webcams, phones, proper cameras. The list is endless. Most computers or laptops now have a webcam built in. You can use that functionality. Let's not kid ourselves here. When you create content for video, it does not have to be the best content you've ever seen in your life. We're not expecting people to be Spielbergs. What we're trying to do is convey a message in a more personal way than just delivering a slide deck with a voiceover. So, fundamentally, if you're making the effort to be on camera and have a conversation with people, even if it's just one way, if it's just a static video, not a live stream, then that's better than anything. So when it comes to editing, there are loads of free softwares out there. Microsoft, what's it called? Movie Maker. Movie Maker is the Microsoft product that you get bundled into most computers nowadays. It's a free software to use. Similarly, if you operate on Macs, iMovie works great. There's also a great piece of software, and it's just escaped me. Davinci Resolve. Davinci Resolve is an excellent piece of software that has a lot of capabilities that more higher end softwares use. But it still has a nice low barrier in terms of skills required, and is really intuitive to use. But the three of those and others are all possible for you to start editing that content. And start off with something small. Start off with a 1 or 2 minute video. Learn how to post it up. There's plenty of information out on YouTube. Let's practice what we preach. Let's learn digitally here. Loads of information on YouTube on those three platforms that I mentioned, or softwares that I mentioned, and also ways that you can hook in things like USB mics and webcams. I'm not using it on stream right now because my computer doesn't connect this type of USB, and I don't have an adapter. But when I'm doing other things, I use this microphone. It's a big USB microphone, admittedly, but it works really well, puts much better audio in than probably what you're getting right now. So I'm looking as a way to pull that into this computer I'm streaming off. But fundamentally, you do not have to spend a lot of money, and it does not have to be hard. What you just need to do is take that leap. Jump into a bit of video to play around, and you'll be surprised at what you can achieve quite quickly. And all those softwares have ways that you can transition in there to show slides or show imagery alongside your face, cut out your voice, clip it, trim it, add an intro, add an outro, and make something that looks pretty professional pretty quickly. And the key to that is templating it. So when you get that front end of an introduction and a back end of the company logo or whatever it is it might be, the thank you message, keep it and just edit the in-between parts. And you'll be surprised at how quickly you can create content. And yes, I couldn't agree more. iMovie is very easy to learn. So I've touched on this again already. The speed at which we need to get things out the door has changed. We need to do that more rapidly. So something that can help with that? We just talked about video, but what about authoring? Authoring of, as we said before, traditional e-learning content. So we're talking about here video in the first instance and e-learning as a second. Probably the two mainstays of any digital learning program. Well, the answer here is authoring tool. But what that means is there's a variety of options. From anything from, building large scale courses with multi-branching threads where you can take a route based upon your responses, animations, storyboarding, even voiceovers, all the way down to the simplistic point of having a number of slides that you've presented and have a simple voiceover to. Or even I've seen it recently with some companies that I've been in touch with, how they are taking someone's slideware or taking even a script and turning that into a video or a piece of e-learning content using AI. And it's done automatically. You can tweak it, but it's done automatically. Those types of tools are hugely important now because, as I said before, we've always had a challenge of getting stuff out in a timely manner. But in the current climate, people are expecting it and people are wanting it. So never before have we had to publish, come up with a concept, storyboard it, write it out and publish it in such a short space of time. We do not have months to do this. We have probably a period of days, maybe a week tops, in a lot of situations to get relevant content out there. Just looking at it from your company's perspective in terms of its outreach when it comes to, and keeping people informed about your policies in this trying time of COVID. I don't know how many new videos I've seen pop up, free ones and paid for ones online relating to, COVID-19, how to wash your hands, all this kind of stuff. There's loads of them, so curate those. But your company policy is something that's specific to you, so you might need to update that on almost a daily basis. Don't make it hard for yourself. Use a simple authoring tool and create the content and just shift in the bits in and out that you need or want to change at that point in time. Resave it, republish, and away you go. Keep it simple. But use those authoring tools to your advantage. And again, the key to doing this quickly is templating. Getting those templates in place that you need really does help to speed up that process. Another option with that, and it's kind of touching on what would have been my next question to you, who is around about how do you build that level of engagement? And I make that kind of weird jump because actually what we're talking about is all this time of learning is how we're engaging our learners. What methods are we going to use to engage? And one of those ways, again, because people potentially have more free time and they have the tools accessible to them on their machines at home, self-authoring of content. There's been a big shift to this in recent years. Why not embrace it more fully? You have the opportunity to involve the people who currently might feel a little bit isolated at home, and just a little bit, but you have the opportunity to involve them in the learning that they're taking part in, or at least delivering to others. So people are already probably doing this in some of the channels, like we said before, like Teams and Slack, but how about formalizing that so it becomes part of a proper program? So when someone does something, they define a new process, or they create their own template on a PowerPoint that might need a bit of explaining about how it's being used, for example, get them to do a short video on it. Get them to record their screen. Again, free software exists where you can do that. Record your screen, publish that content, and then straight away you've got ready-made content for your audience, but also your audience is participating in creating it. This is the perfect time to do that. Again, another great question from Yenny there about how do we make sure that all the content made will come together into one learning experience. Yeah, that is a great question, because if you have all these people, you empower them to create, then you're going to have potentially multiple avenues of content where you may want to curate some and not all of it. The answer for that will be down to the way that you use your system. So at Valamis, we would pull that into learning paths and source that to the individuals. So we'd pull like-minded topics or topics that complement one another around a topic area, fundamentally. I would advise, and things that we do with our customers is to set these up, set up potentially workflows by which if someone authors a piece of content, so via a self-authoring process, it doesn't automatically get published. It can go out to an approving body or panel of individuals that can say yes or no to a piece of content. It can be checked before it gets published to the site or curated into other things like learning paths or broader courses. So I think that depends upon your company's technology setup and the way that you currently curate your content to your learners. But fundamentally, it should form part of that process. What I would do is look at those people creating that content and look at them as instructional designers. Obviously, they don't come with the same skill sets and they have a different approach, but fundamentally, they are a content house that you're now utilizing, and with any content house, whether you purchase it or curate it, there should always be a process of vetting and consideration of where that content might be relevant within your world. So it's the same principle, except that I think it's just maybe a bit strange for some people, considering it's content created by people in their own organisation. Following on from engagement, let's talk about, in terms of learners, let's talk about the whole learner journey here, because we've talked about a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. So how do we create this content that gets onto the platforms or gets into the sites where people are sitting consuming this content? But let's be honest, as I pull it back to what we said before, how do you transfer what was originally probably a blended solution or had some degree of face-to-face component and turn that into a purely digital one? And the answer is you can't, but you can get damn near close. And that's about building an overall experience. It's about staggering those learning interventions potentially to create this feeling of momentum. It's also about utilizing the whole host of things, or at least a large proportion of them that we spoke about thus far, to engage people outside of the typical learning. So those things like forums, self-authoring, and other social learning tools are hugely important. They help keep that conversation alive. You need that. You need that activity. We have people here now who have come on board. They've come to look at what we're delivering to them. How can we continue to add value, and how can they continue to add it to us? So if I was now designing a piece of content or a course, albeit, topic, permitting, because again, you're not going to do this across a huge host of, say, my previous example of COVID, our COVID policy as an organisation, you're probably not going to do it with this, but with, more standardised training that we'd normally be delivering, think about it, plan it, storyboard it. They're going to go through this intervention. So let's say they're going to watch a 3-minute video that you've created, where you're introducing the program of a bit of personality and vim and vigour. And then they're going to move on to something that's maybe a bit more theory-based. Maybe it requires some slideware and it's perfect for to be presented in e-learning format. Maybe then, though, they can jump into a forum or they can jump into Slack or wherever it is that they're engaging with their peers and have a conversation around what they're doing. And I don't mean a forced conversation where we say, go in and talk about this. What I mean is encourage people or have people inside your L&D function who are naturally encouraging those conversations to take place. Going and telling people, you must now go and make 10 forum posts, whilst, obviously achievable on most platforms now, or a lot of platforms, it doesn't necessarily make someone feel engaged. You need to have the compelling reason for them to go and do those things that they need to do. And the best way to do that is to show them how valuable those resources are, how people are using them to share best practice, how people are learning from others, and how people are giving back to the same people that are learning with them at the same time. That's how you build the experience. So, and then I would interject more video, more e-learning, and spread that program across a period of time where they can go through it, themselves, self-paced, or they could decide, I'm going to spread this over a month, or I'm going to spread this over a week. Give them the option. But the point is that I would be chunking these things differently. I wouldn't be looking at it as thinking, we did a 2-day program here, or a 1-day program. How do we convert that directly into e-learning or delivery? Take the key components. Take those things that really make the difference in that content. We know, and I know from my past, designing and creating content, you add things in there that are nice things, nice fluffers, ways to pass the time almost, you're still maintaining engagement with your audience, but it's a different way. And that's the purpose of them. In this instance, what you really need to do is boil down to the real theory, deliver it in a personal way, and get them back to doing what they need to do, but feeling like they've had value. If there's two things that people should take away, it's that feel like they've moved forwards in their capability or knowledge, and that is of value. They derived value from that experience. If those two things happen, then we succeeded, and they will come back for more learning. So that kind of leads me back to kind of the original question, which is, how do you replicate that blended learning experience? And I'm hoping that through this I've given some encouragement to people about how you might go about pulling those constituent parts together and creating an experience. But I'd be really interested to see if there's any comments in the chat here relating to that. I've gone on a 20-minute rant there on various bits and pieces. So I'm gonna probably be quiet for a few moments. If anyone's writing anything in the comments, please post up. As I said, this is how these kind of things really work at their best. It's great when I can get the feedback and we can talk about some specific examples, but I'll just leave that open to you to comment. But if not, we are also streaming twice weekly. As I said, we're supposed to have a guest on today, but we couldn't. We have Laura Overton's coming back for I think maybe two more live streams over the next few weeks or so, which will be great to have her knowledge and experience in the industry. We have potentially some others lined up, but I'm working on those as to